Welcome to Changing the Channel with Joe Garner, a show about shifting our individual and collective beliefs on what is possible for the future of humanity. As our understanding of how our reality continues to shift, we are at a point of reunification between science and spirituality. What does the world look like when we break free from the generational trauma that has kept most humans playing small for thousands of years and step into our full power as the co-creators of this reality? I always ask that you keep an open mind with this podcast. Ask yourself what resonates with my truth at this time and what does not. Respect your intuition, but see if you can get through the whole show because there might be that little nugget buried deep in the conversation that unlocks something for you. Welcome back, everybody, to Changing the Channel. I am joined by two beautiful humans today. They are both the co-founders and CEO and CMO of Massive, a wonderful company that is bringing about the change that we talk about on the show every single day. So I am joined by Dr. Virginia Lacayo and Justin Foster, who are both going to be chiming in and telling us about this journey into Massive and what it's been like. So welcome to the show, guys. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Thank you for having us here.
Thank you, Joe.
You guys are very welcome. So for those who have not heard of Massive and what you guys are doing, give us a little bit of background as far as the journey to it. And I know you guys have very different backgrounds. So how did it all come together to create this, monumental shifting idea that is Massive?
Well, if I might start, I think it's the beauty of this is that we both were walking a path that actually get to the point where we cross and we make it fit. I mean, we realized that we were very complementary to bring about our biggest dream and what we consider is our mission in this life. But we have, as you mentioned, very, very different paths. I am Nicaraguan. And just to give you a quick overview of my background, and I grew up in the middle of a war, and I grew up in the middle of a society that was trying to rebuild itself in a more just, was kind of utopian idea at that time. And I start very early in my life, I start being familiar and aware of social justice and social issues and what it means, inequality and diversity, all the human rights, all those things that few people are exposed that at that early age. I spent my whole adolescence and, school years really being part of this process and learning a lot about what social change is really about. And since then, I've been an activist and a feminist. So it's a long life journey of fighting for social justice. But I was very intrigued by, okay, we want to change the system. We want to change society, but how we go about doing that, how other people have actually shaped history before and what it takes. Because we dream of this, but then who has the skills? What are the skills that we needed? What are the knowledge that we needed? So that became my obsession for a long time. And I went through a lot of things. I was a practitioner. I worked on organizations that work on communication for social change, strategists, and I did my master in communication for social change, and then I did my doctoral program on behavioral change and complexity science, and that really changed my life and my mind because I really start to understand what social sciences doesn't explain us about human behavior, especially at the collective level. Was like, oh, this science that come from hard sciences, that this body of knowledge and theories that come from hard sciences actually explain a lot about how humans behave and change at the collective level. And so I start doing what I thought was the best. So I started teaching. As a professor, I was an international consultant. I worked with many big international organizations on designing strategies for social change and social justice. And then I realized that there was one missing element of all that. I could help them to create the most beautiful, effective strategies on paper. But if the organizational culture was not ready to actually implement a paradigm shift like that, like the ones that we were proposing, and the leaders didn't have the right mindset and the right leadership skills that are the opposite of the traditional leadership skills that we have and we learn, then nothing will work. And actually was not working. So that's how I went back to school and got my certifications as coach. And I started developing my own methodology, combining everything I had, everything I know, everything I am. That is that feminist perspective with the complexity science and systemic leadership perspective with mindset and neuroscience and how the brains work and change, and combining all that to actually equip leaders, to train them and to help them to develop the right mindset and the right skills to actually bring about systemic change. And that's in that process, I met Justin, and he's going to tell you his own journey, but what I recognized in him was an amazing capacity to communicate and to bring about um, what your soul is trying to say to the world, what is your purpose in life, your mission, to actual words, into the language that we use as a channel for communicating with each other and with the rest of humanity. And that was one of the essential requirements to bring about social change and to bring about systemic change, because we cannot do it by ourselves. We need a community. We need a tribe. We need allies. We need to create some kind of movement of join, share vision, that so we can all fight together for the change that we want. And we need communication to be able to not just understand each other and collaborate with each other in a respectful um, and um, what will be the word, appreciative way, but also to have the precise language to communicate what really matters, not just what our heads are thinking and our ideas, but actually what is true. And Justin is extremely talented at that. And that was kind of the missing piece. So besides the fact that we connected at soul level and intellectual level and many other levels, we found each other very complementary in what we wanted to offer to the world and how our skills and experience can help people, better when we combine them. So that's how Massive was created. That's my version of it, at least.
Finally, a place for listeners to gather and share. Join the Ascension Update Substack for messages and updates from our brothers and sisters helping with the Ascension, articles on the future of humanity, and a Q&A where you can ask my guides anything you would like. This is the hub for everything Ascension related. Click the link in the show notes or go to joegarner.substack.com to stay at the leading edge of this movement. And now, back to the show. Gotcha. And when did you guys meet? Where did you guys meet? Like, what was that? What was that like?
Yeah, and we met in December of 2020 through mutual friends. I think we first connected on LinkedIn. And I was aware that I didn't want to be like a lot of dudes on LinkedIn, sort of like subtly creepy. So we had some back and forth, and we met for lunch, and which turned into a coffee. And a few days later, I took Virginia to the airport for a business trip, and when we said goodbye, it was like, this is us now. And so that soul connection coalesced into a relationship very quickly, and into a partnership, into, essentially, putting it this way, we found each other's person. And I'll say I'd had this sort of unease about what I was doing in the world for a while. COVID kind of cracked that open. The George Floyd murder affected it. And so did the January 6th situation. What happened with the insurrection, all of those and many other factors were just like, I wasn't content with the way I was doing things with the skills and the talents and gifts that I'd received. But I had no idea when I met Virginia that we would start a business together. It was not like, it's not like I was looking for a business partner. But there were these moments where I realized, for example, with her son, I say my son now too, my stepson, like, oh, wait, we're together because he needs something from me. So that was like an awareness. Okay, all right, I'll show up for that. And then the business idea emerged in, I think, early 2022, and we began to kind of talk about what that would look like. And then later that year, Massive was born. So we jokingly say we're too old to have kids, so Massive is our baby to some extent.
Beautiful. I love that.
Yeah. And I grew up in a very, I got a weird backstory, because I grew up on a cattle ranch in Eastern Oregon. I grew up in cowboy life, and very proud of that. Cowboy life is a very different culture than, what people perceive rural culture to be. And it was really a positive growing up on a ranch and being around livestock and, that Western tradition. But I also was raised in a fundamentalist Christian cult. And I was raised in an extremely violent, unstable home. And, many of us that become entrepreneurs, we become entrepreneurs as almost like a trauma response. Like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, so no one can tell me what to do. And I didn't start off as an entrepreneur. I started off in sales, but I opened my first business with some other guys in 2001. And I was 31 years old at the time. And, but spent the last two and a half decades on brand strategy, and helping companies all over the world, every industry, every sector. Always been kind of an outlaw the way I do branding and marketing. But in 2014, I had a spiritual awakening, and my life the hologram that I thought was my life began to unravel. And the unraveling is a whole other story, bigger stories of various pieces. But part of the reconstruction of me, this like almost like final piece of the puzzle was massive. And that I don't want to use my gifts and my abilities, and thank you for Virginia for your kind words, but my ability to help translate people's soul into brand language, I only want to use it for conscious people that are really trying to do good in the world with their businesses or nonprofits.
Yeah, that's a unique position, and I feel that as well, as I've gone through my spiritual awakening and just really understanding who I truly want to be working with, and where I can show up the best for those people, and just kind of finding that balance. I'm not as far along on the journey as you are, and I'm still learning and understanding as I go, but it is, I know that feeling that you have where it's like, well, these are the people that I'm here to work with or help or guide. And, if somebody else comes along, it's a decision that you have to make. Does it align? Is it who you want to be working with?
Yeah. And I came through to consciousness kind of through the spiritual door, really. And then more began to develop mindfulness and, I guess you could call it like intellectual or mental consciousness, kind of the Sam Harris, Dan Harris, Rick Hansen kind of theme of consciousness, much more from a neuroscience perspective. And it really wasn't, as I said, until 2020, I started to have this awareness of social consciousness. But then with Virginia being a woman, an immigrant, a Latina, her very global perspective. And I realized I had a lot of biases. I mean, I probably still do. I had a lot of biases, and it really wasn't until the last few years that I've had this awakening of social consciousness of basically I would put it this way: spiritual consciousness is intrinsic, intellectual consciousness tends to be more extrinsic, how you relate to the world, and social consciousness is very systemic. And I started to see and educate myself on like systemic inequities that were kind of set up from the very beginning. And I love our country. I'm proud to be an American most of the time, but we have systems that the people that like me have benefited from that come at the expense of other people, especially people from, traditionally marginalized groups. And I have that awareness was even more like the only way there's a lot of different ways to change this, but all of them are going to require the right words. Like you can build systems and you can put money into things and everything, but if you don't use the right language, nothing's going to happen.
Right. And that's how humans operate. We operate through stories.
Right.
Our reality is based on the stories that we tell ourselves. And I think that's a beautiful way to realize that the only effective way to change is for people to change the story that they're telling themselves, to change the story that they believe in. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about just what Massive is kind of doing and the two different aspects. It sounds like, obviously, Justin, you have kind of your specialty of what you're bringing to the table. And Virginia, obviously you have your specialty. So what are those different specialties, and then how have they kind of molded to create this, something greater than the sum of the parts?
Well, Massive was created to equip leaders to shape the system. I mean, to become history shapers eventually. I mean, that's our dream, is to coach leaders that will become history shapers, that will change the history completely. In the meantime, we know that there's a process and that we are at different stages in terms of consciousness and our level of consciousness, and also our capacities and the resources, the conditions that we have to make certain kind of change. But we also believe that nobody came to this world to keep these things the same. Nobody has as a mission, as a purpose in life, is to let's keep things exactly as they are, as I found them. We all have that calling, consciously or not. I mean, some of us recognize it already, so the others is still dormant somehow. But we all have the calling to make a difference, to contribute to something that is greater than ourselves and our immediate circle, let's say. And we want to help people that are aware of that calling and is willing to do whatever it takes to answer that call and to make a difference. So we do it in different ways. One of the ways, I mean, we have right now 3 different ways. One is what we call the moonshot immersive, that is, just briefly, is intensive kind of workshop / bootcamp / retreat that take the 2 of us, both of our brain expertise and experience and knowledge and skills, to dedicate 3 days full time to one person that is kind of trying to articulate their calling in a better way, and they need help to articulate that idea, to articulate the message, to design a brand strategy, to design a plan, like a strategy to monetize that idea, to make it sustainable, and to work on their mindset and say, like, okay, how do I go about this, and what do I need to work on from now on? So that's the moonshot, and has helped some people really to go from, I have this strong feeling that is suffocating me and I don't know what to do about it. There is no coping mechanism anymore that satisfy that feeling and that void, that urge, that eagerness. I mean, whatever you want to call it. And to take them from there to have clarity, excitement, and a plan of, say, like, this is what I came here for, and this is how I'm going to do it. So that's one of the things that we help people with. But the other thing that we have 2 other things. I mean, Justin is going to talk about the conscious brand, but in my case, I I have this belief because of my background. I worked for many years in the nonprofit sector. I have worked with the corporate sector, and I have worked with the public sector in many ways. And because of my background and experience and coaching, teaching hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of women and leaders from different countries, different continents, and different backgrounds on how to fight the system for the rights, I get to a point where I plan to keep doing that, to, leading and coaching leaders on how to fight the system for the rights. But I get to a point where I think that now my mission is to actually coach women executive with a background that is from, or they belong to, one of the marginalized groups or communities, on how to change the damn system, not just keep fighting the system for other people's right, but actually use the resource, the power, the authority, the influence they have to change the system radically. So the program that we designed for that is called the Intersectional Leadership, or the Intersectional Leaders. And its executive coaching program is mostly designed for women executives that has that background, that come from a marginalized group and have the power and the willing to actually get into trouble and change the system. And they're willing to use the resource they have available and the influence and the power they had available to do that. And so what the program does is that, based on decades of experience and my academic background and everything that I know, I realized that to actually change the system, you need to understand first that the system that we work in, that we are part of, and the leadership that we learn and we implement, no matter how well-intended we are, is heavily influenced by oppressive systems. And so we are part of a set of paradigms and belief systems that keep us oppressed and that keep us reproducing that kind of oppression. We're being influenced, our leadership right now is being influenced by patriarchy, white supremacy, religion, fundamentalists, and consumerist capitalism. And those systems are designed to keep to keep the system in place. And everything we do is based on what we learn from those systems. As you said, our reality is really a reflection of the story we tell ourselves. And what we tell ourselves is based on what we learn either. And we go by life without ever challenging anything in our mind based on our socialization. It's not that I'm blaming ourselves, but based on our socialization, what our mind tells ourselves about who we are, what is true, what is not true, and what is possible and not possible. And if we don't challenge those things, we're never going to be able to see the matrix, let's say, to see the metrics and how the whole system is designed to keep us believing that, to keep us, press and playing small, and to keep other people pressed in the same way. So this intersectional leadership is a combination of paradigms that will challenge all that will kind of free us from all those belief systems and allow us to see reality and to see our organization, our industry, the whole society in a completely different way, and to show us what is possible and how to change it. So it has a combination of feminist perspective and approaches to really understand what social change and social justice and equity and diversity and inclusion really means, and not just the trendy glossary about that, but what it really means in practice, the subtle ways that we're not actually being aligned to those beliefs. So it has feminist components. It has complexity science. It's informed by complexity science to help leaders to understand all the complexities of the system that we want to change. We cannot change a system if we don't understand all the complexities of it, all the parts and different elements that integrate it, how everything affects and is affected by everything else, how to push the system in a certain direction and when to stay out of the way. And with that, the kind of leadership skills that we need to lead an ecosystem, not a machine. That is the way we perceive organizations right now, but an ecosystem. And we haven't learned how to be ecosystems that are autonomous and predictable and uncontrollable. And especially in these times of uncertainty and rapid change, we need to develop those skills. So that is the component of complexity science. And the third component is neuroscience, is based on neuroscience and mindset development. So it's to build the mindset that I call indomable mindset. And indomable is a Spanish word that loosely translates to impossible to domesticate. So you start by what I call decolonizing your mind from all those oppressive systems to really understand the difference between facts and the stories that we tell ourselves, to really be able to understand your mind with compassion, but also manage your thoughts and your emotions so you get the results that you really, really want to get, instead of having your ego driving the car for you. So combining feminism and mindset and, neuroscience with complexity science and systemic leadership and skills, that really equips leaders to understand complex systems like organizations and industry and society, and to change them by changing themselves first, but also by helping the whole system to understand the change they as a system they want, to create the conditions for those changes, to remove the obstacle for innovation and collaboration and in the enrichment of diversity, and to stay out of the way when we need to. So that's the program that I'm leading right now, that is called the Intersectional Leader.
Yeah, that sounds like a very powerful, and again, kind of bringing in all the different aspects, the science base. Is complexity science similar to like system dynamics, where it's understanding systems from the idea that there's an intelligence of, a group of things all acting in their own, I don't want to say selfish ways, but, basically acting in their own accord. But when they are all brought together, there's something that is birthed that is, a higher level of intelligence. And that's,
Exactly.
yeah.
And systems, when we talk about system dynamics, we talk that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And the sum is not the way we think, that the organization is just all the people in the organization. It's way greater than that, and has its own autonomy and its own pattern of behavior that is shaped by the way we interact with each other and with other elements of the system, but is somehow has its own autonomy and way of behave that is not just the sum of our values, our beliefs, or our actions. And we don't know how to lead that kind of systems yet. We don't know enough about them, but it's important, because otherwise is, trying to force a square into a triangle shape. We're using leadership skills that might work centuries ago, when everything was more simple and we were complex systems back then, but because of technology and globalization and everything that is happening right now, back then was easier to think, or at least to believe, that thinking in a linear way was effective. Now we face reality every day that what we plan, especially when we talk about log frames, like I do this, then this happened, and this is the result, never happened that way. And we always end up wondering what happened. And we think that we didn't plan enough, that we need more data, that we need to blame someone, we need to fire someone, or we need to train someone. When it's not about that. It's just about not understanding that complex systems behave in a way that is uncontrollable and unpredictable. And we need to navigate. We need to learn how to not command the wave, but surf the wave,
Right.
learn how to surf it.
Exactly.
So,
That's kind of the new way of managing, is not necessarily that it's like top down command of the organization. It's like, okay, how do we put enough frameworks where this wave isn't going to spill over somewhere or crash where we don't want it to crash? It's like, just kind of building the guardrails, which goes along with the kind of raising intelligence of humanity. The idea that over the last, I think it's 4 generations, each generation has gotten 7 IQ points smarter than the generation before it. So we're coming into this world where, you don't need these top-down approaches. People are intelligent enough to make their own decisions and be guided by the intelligence that they have. And this is a part of the new world that I think we're experiencing, we're learning, we're understanding. And it's always, we're always a little bit behind where evolution in society is happening. So to kind of be at the forefront of that, I think is very powerful to be helping guide and show this next generation of people what is going on and how it's happening.
That's the idea. I mean, millennials and Gen Zers in particular are getting very savvy about understanding the metrics and understanding social justice in a different way, in a more holistic way than any generation before. And I think it's our responsibility, the older generation, is to provide some kind of leadership model that is different so they can use as a reference. I mean, they're going to come up with their own for sure. But I think that I was talking with someone earlier today about that those generations are very innovative and very have their own leadership style. I mean, they come with that leadership nature, let's say, but they don't have the role models that we have, that our generations have before, of true history shapers, that the good leaders that we wanted to emulate and follow and understand and study. They don't have that. And that makes that their generations that are less well organized. And to change a system, you need to know how to create a movement somehow. I mean, you need to be able to organize the whole system around a shared vision. And they don't have those skills because it's a very individualistic, isolated society that is not helping them develop that kind of skills. So I think that is our responsibility to start now. And because eventually those generations are gonna, I mean, even right now, we can agree that social pressure and market pressure are the same thing. And they are the market and they are the public opinion right now, and they're gonna be. So if we don't catch up with what the world is demanding from now, we're going to have to do it by force when it's probably too late for us to adjust and to learn. So this is a time where I think, and especially that's why I believe so strongly in the potential of women executives that also come from a marginalized group to take on the lead of systemic change right now, to develop those skills, to develop that understanding, that knowledge, that change of paradigm, and become the role models of what the new leadership should be about, and somehow model for the new generations of how to lead systemic change in complex systems like ours.
Right. Yeah, that's powerful. I love all of that. I think it's going to be amazing, and it's good that you guys are doing this now, like you said, and not waiting till the last minute, and then to have that handing off of the baton kind of thing. And if it doesn't go well, if there's too much distance between the runners when you're handing that baton off, the exchange doesn't go. It doesn't happen. You get disqualified basically, and that's where we're at between generations. It's like if this handing of the baton between the older generations and these newer generations coming in, there's no cohesiveness, there's no ability for them to see eye to eye even, well then that's going to be a weird place that we're going to put humanity in. And I'm very definitely, I have a positive view on this, and that the systems are changing. They're being affected by this younger generation and by this new group of people who have come in, who have a little bit, from my perspective, they seem to know why they're here. They don't have to go through the experience of their 30s and 40s to figure out, okay, this is the reason that I'm I've incarnated. This is the reason that I'm here. Like a lot of them have this innate ability, like that I am here for this reason, and they're taking action on it, which is powerful, and I love to see that. So it's kind of the job of maybe that older generation, that generation that's in power right now, to kind of see that and realize, okay, let's make these changes. Let's see how we can relate to this next generation that's coming up, because we're going to have to either way. So yeah, just stepping into that. But yeah, Justin, fill us in a little bit as far as your role and what you're bringing for Massive.
Yeah. So, um, if you look at the world's most enduring brands, you will note that they are really two kinds of brands, and they're very related. And I'll explain why in a minute. One is the spiritual masters, whether that be the big ones like Jesus or Buddha, but also like Rumi or Hafiz. You go look at the spiritual masters. They have brands that are thousands of years old now, and that's there's a lesson there. The other brands that are enduring that seem to transcend time are your social justice brands. From Harriet Tubman to Gandhi to Nelson Mandela. I mean, we could, many examples. So what I've been doing over the years, kind of pre-Massive, but definitely like all in with this with Massive, is teaching business leaders basically how to brand the same way that the spiritual master is branded. And that's three things. One is you have to build a school of philosophy. You know, and you look at the Stoics, or you look at Buddhism, or you look at Jesus's teachings. You pick all that, or Martin Luther King Jr. and um, civil disobedience, nonviolent disobedience, civil disobedience. These are schools of philosophy, and what schools of philosophy allow is they allow it to be adapted and expanded and evolved by the people that get involved in it. So the movement takes on its own life of its own. And there's a lot of rigidity in business, and a lot of this belief that the business model is the thing that people are drawn to. And it's really not the case, especially in this world we live in of hyper commoditization and way oversaturation of information and marketing. So you got to develop your school of philosophy, and that's really around like, what are your virtues, not just values, but what are your virtues as an organization? In that too is the understanding that many business leaders, especially founders and CEOs, that's kind of who our main clients are. They want their business to be a reflection of their level of consciousness. And so that's where this idea of learning these branding lessons from spiritual masters comes in. The other two things that we work with them on is, as mentioned already, is the message, the language that they use, their entire lexicon, what I call brand poetry. And branding language right now is often manipulative, cheesy, creepy, boring. It's rarely do you see marketing messaging and marketing language that's interesting and moves the soul. But when you do see it, you see, there's this significant shift in kind of the paradigm of between the buyer and the brand, and it feels like a bond. It feels like that, and there's actually a neuroscience term for this called neurocoupling. That's basically the neuroscience of trust. Well, that comes from language more than anything else. So messaging and language, we work with them on. And then the last lesson from the spiritual masters, as far as how their brands were built, is organize around word of mouth. Do not organize around promotion or advertising budgets. I'm not against advertising, but to quote my friend Andy Cernovitz, advertising is the price you pay for being boring. Mm-hmm. And if you have this brand that you want to be a reflection of your consciousness, boring is a terribly expensive mistake. And so without all of that, that's kind of the brand strategy component. And then there's another element of what I call ethical marketing. And ethical marketing is a realization that once your consciousness level is raised, you see people differently. And it's almost like a 180. You move from seeing roles and then souls to souls, then roles. And you see that. That's what namaste really is. I see the power in you, and there's this sort of interdependence between you and the marketplace. And those are mechanisms that you can build into your product strategy. They're mechanisms you can build into the way that you market. And so there's various tools that we're teaching clients on how to market ethically in a way that's a reflection of their values and virtues of the brand. And then in some cases, I serve as a fractional CMO for some of these companies because they don't necessarily have a senior leader in a marketing role. And so they retain me through Massive to help them, shepherd the brand into into this kind of new phase that they're in. And I would end this little soliloquy with this idea too: is we can teach you great messaging and brand poetry and how to build a category and how to do the right marketing systems, all that. What we cannot give you is courage. And courage is the singular trait of a history shaper, of a system shaker. So if you have the calling and you have the courage, yeah, you need a brand, and you need everything that Virginia mentioned as well. You need the mindset, you need the systemic leadership skills, but none of those are substitute for courage. And that's why who we work with, sadly right now, is a pretty small group of people, because there's a lot of business leaders that are afraid to be different. They're afraid to express themselves. They whisper their spirituality. They don't express it. A mutual friend of ours, she once said, everywhere I go, I meet business leaders with a secret spiritual life. And our plea to business leaders is make the world react to you. Show them who you are. Show them your soul. It will be okay. But that's encouragement, not courage. And so just driving that point home.
Yeah. I mean, from my perspective, and this kind of leads into the next question. It's like, what gives you guys the courage to get out there to both play in the spiritual world and in the business world? Like, how did that courage come about? And what is it like to have these conversations with traditional business people with a very, very spiritual kind of undertone or aspect to what you guys are talking about?
Go ahead, Justin.
Well, it's an interesting thing because I think everything is spiritual. I think it's always been this way. You go back to indigenous peoples, you go back to the mystics of the Middle Ages. There's always been this component. We just give it different names. And there's been what's happened is that there's been, and Virginia mentioned this earlier, this overdependence on data as sort of a crutch. But when you do consciousness work, you understand that intuition is data. It's not the only data, but it's still data, not instinct. Instinct keeps your body and your ego alive, but intuition, that's a thing. Creativity as an energy source, or sacral energy, that's a thing. Those have always been there within entrepreneurism and within innovation. I think that when we run into someone that really disagrees with what we're doing, and they don't think that those things go together, and that's usually your sort of like secular Wall Street type person, or more often than not, you're like MAGA Christian, that they don't like the way we do things. I've been accused many times of being a woke liberal, which is amusing to me. And the difference here is we're not trying to convince them. We don't have time for that. What we want to do is put a signal out into the world where somebody says, "Oh, you guys talk differently. You say things that I've sort of just kept to myself." And there's a sense of like being seen and being found. And I think that's where I go back to challenging people that spirituality and business have always been together. It's because we're humans and we have a soul, and why wouldn't it? It's that the unnatural thing is to remove all the soul from business. That's unnatural.
Right.
It's unnatural to make make everyone dress and act and talk the same. That's why I used to tell my sons, as you're older, you look around and everybody talks the same, looks the same, acts the same. You're either in a cult or a major corporation. It's like this thing about sameness, and it goes back to the industrial age or smokestack thinking about repetitiveness and the machine. But there's nothing spiritual in that. There's nothing spiritual in that. So we're not really reintroducing spirituality into business. We are saying it's been there all along. And now, because of the times that we live in, this is the time to come out, as it were, as a spiritual business leader.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you on that one, that again, there's always been a spiritual component to every business. Steve Jobs talks about intuition playing the biggest role
Yes.
in his development as a leader. And Warren Buffett talks about
Yeah.
being able to feel when a deal is right and when a deal is wrong, or when
Right.
he's working with a management company. It's not about, yeah, he does look at the books and he's got all of these data points that he's staring at, but the main driver in his decisions is the gut feeling, the intuition that he gets.
Right.
And that is such a huge part of the business world that seems to have been neglected, or at least not talked about. I don't think it's been neglected. I think it's just been, hush hush.
Yeah.
You can't
Right.
you can't talk about that.
Yeah.
How do we systematize intuition, right?
Yeah. And I also think too, we live in an era now where we have more MBAs than in the history of the world. And I'm not against MBAs, but we're still doing the same stupid shit in companies. We're not listening to the people. We're using manipulative marketing tactics. We have an over reliance on data, and everybody's got the same sort of like systems and tools now. There's not a big difference between a solo practitioner with QuickBooks and a massive corporation. It's just all to scale. The difference, the differentiator, is those that have done the consciousness work, however they get there, and they're able to tap into intuition and creativity. And if you look at it from an energetic standpoint, from a much more feminine energetic perspective, they are the ones crushing it. Now, they're not necessarily famous, but they will be as this trend continues.
Right. Because we're so early on in this transition period. It's not like we've been doing this for 30 or 40 years. I mean, we're talking about 2020 kind of really kicking
somewhere
off
around
this
transitional
period. And I know a lot of people went through their spiritual awakening times. That's when I had my spiritual awakening, was around 2020. And, just kind of getting into and understanding what it is. What does that look like as you go through this kind of spiritual awakening? I also know that the spiritual awakening is almost like going through your teens again, where you have to relearn how you do and operate in the world. And that is another kind of interesting and fascinating aspect of that kind of spiritual awakening. We all go through kind of a savior phase where we're here to save the whole world. And then we go through, then we realize, oh, actually, there's many other people who are here to help along this way, and now co-creating with people and doing things that are working alongside other people that resonate with their energy, and continuing to kind of evolve as a spiritual being having a human experience. You almost, especially, for people like you and I, Justin, to have that experience later on in life and not be born with that's a whole aspect of life, aspect of this this generation of humans that are going through this. Because again, from my perspective, it seems like either you were tuned in from birth and always had that underlying experience of spirituality, which is typically kind of the feminine aspect of life, or you're completely void of it, and then at some point somewhere you awoken to this spiritual nature, this spiritual aspect of yourself, and then again have to figure out, all right, what do I do from here? What are the next steps?
Yes.
So I think the last kind of question that I have for you guys, and again, this has been a very enlightening conversation. I love the energy that you guys bring. I love the ideas that you're sharing, and just, making it okay, because you're giving permission to people to share their spirituality, to share their journey, to share their life's work in a business setting, and to be able to do that, I think is very, very powerful. So how do you see the evolution of business? Say everything's working out great, Massive is making this huge shift in how businesses are operating. What does that start to look like over the next maybe 2 to 5 years from your guys' perspective?
I'm sorry, you're asking about how we see the future of Massive or the future of the business realm?
The business landscape, let's
Right.
say Massive, and people like Massive are able to create this shift in consciousness in the business world. Like, what does that transition look like from your perspective, and how are companies going to be different from what most people think companies are here to do?
Well, in general, in terms of the landscape, I think that we already mentioned a few things that we can see as not too hard to predict. One of them is what you said. Systems are changing already. The system is changing already. It's unstoppable. Change is the only constant. So it will keep changing. The things that if we don't step and direct or somehow influence the direction of what the system is taking, the system will take whatever direction it wants, not necessarily the direction we want it to have. And that's why, for instance, the system is going towards, the earth destruction in many ways in terms of environment, but it's also going, and part of that direction is going into a whole revelation of new generations that we haven't seen in a long time. I mean, it's like a really big shift in paradigm from especially Gen Zers. And so that's going to have an impact in the business landscape for sure. And all the changes that we're already experiencing, especially after COVID, they're over relying on technology, and we're losing the capacity to interconnect in person with other humans. I mean, to have to establish and nurture interpersonal connections. So how that's gonna impact the world and business in general. But we're also seeing increase in awakenings, and the level of conscious from a lot of people in business, and not in business, I mean young generations, but even in business, leaders, CEOs that are waking up about a lot of issues, and they might not know yet what to do with that awakening, or how to turn that awakening into something that really make an impact and really change the system, not just more charity, not just like doing good things, but actually change the system. And that's where we think that people like us, not just us, but visionaries like us, might give a good contribution. I think it's a good time for us to start contributing this way, because it's the time where people are saying this is not working. I mean, the system is changing, but not necessarily in the direction we want. We have the resource, the capacity that young generations don't have yet. So they will do their own revolution, but we have the power right now. We have the resource right now. They don't. And we are capable of doing something right now that later they're going to have to repair. If we don't fix it now, they're going to have to pay the prices and they're going to have to be repairing what we didn't do. And there is an increase in consciousness that way. And I think that's positive. That's an optimistic way of seeing things, because the more awake we are and the more research we have at the same time, the better the chances to actually turn that into something that contributes to a greater good than is not just ourselves and our profit and our organizations. So we are in general very optimistic. We think that this kind of effort are very timely, and that we are seeing already people approaching us. And when we talk about what we're doing and our vision, the response has been unanimously, I think, positive, saying like, this is what is needed. We need to do this. We need to embrace this. We still need to develop the courage. We still need to understand how unique and important and inexchangeable our contribution, our personal contribution is to the world. And therefore to say it's not really an option not to bring that courage. It's not an option for me not to have courage. I have to have it because I was not born to keep things the same. And I have something to contribute, and it's my duty to do it. And if I have to hire a coach or go to therapy or get a counselor or whatever to bring that courage so I can do what I came here to do, then I'm going to do it. And I think that more and more people are becoming aware of that and start taking small steps. We are a little impatient because we want things to change faster, and we want to see like literally massive movements towards that. But we're seeing that and I think it's gonna actually get better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think also, Joe, that I think there's two big trends, and they're kind of interrelated. One is we can see the data on this. When women from marginalized groups get into leadership positions, whether that's an executive in a company or they start a business, they do not behave the same as their counterparts. That's also true with men from traditionally marginalized groups as well, but even more so with women. And I think we're going to see, and there's plenty of evidence of this new wave of entrepreneurs and founders that are using their brand as social justice instruments. And that we don't tell people what that should be. That's up to you and your calling and your set of beliefs. But it's more of this awareness that there is no separateness between what I'm here to do and my business. They're one and the same. It's just a matter of how they're experienced. I think another thing that you're going to see is get similar now, and the trend is already starting, similar to what happened during the Cold War between West and East Germany, and then what became the Berlin Wall in West and East Berlin, is the talent drain to the West happened. And so there's this talent drain now that's moving the most talented people, which also often are very conscious, more conscious people, into organizations that liberate them to be themselves, that free them to work remotely or to have side projects. And there's this bifurcation that's happening where if you're super talented and not entrepreneurial, somebody wants you and they will pay you a shit ton of money, and you're free to do you. Or if you have talent and you decide to be an entrepreneur, you can build a business now out of your mission. That's such a profoundly amazing moment in history to say, if you have a calling or you have a thing, you have a spiritual gift, you can build a business around it because of things that are often criticized because of the internet and social media and all that stuff. That's why we can't. I saw a statistic the other day that if you combined all of Etsy's makers together, the revenue that they make together, so not Etsy's revenue, but the Etsy makers, it would be, I think I read, the 9th largest economy in the world. That's an example of where I see businesses going, where they are going to be more and more platforms of social justice, not just getting behind causes, but actually inventing new ways of doing things. You see this in the hemp industry. You see this in green energy. You see this in med tech, fintech. They're all doing things. There's businesses in each of them that are doing things for humanity with profit, to quote Ken Blanchard, being the applause, as opposed to manipulating or extracting from humanity and having it go to shareholder value. And I think the business world is slowly dividing into those two camps. And only one of those models is going to survive. The machines will die. The companies that are run like ecosystems are going to thrive.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. I don't think a machine is capable of keeping up with an ecosystem. It just isn't able to thrive because the ecosystem is shifting and changing at the individual level, whereas the machine has a central processor that has to make all these different decisions. And um, it makes it very difficult for that. And it's interesting to see how humans are taking AI and they're trying to uh, make that more of an ecosystem, trying to make this computational ability more of an ecosystem and less of just straight computational power. And how that has the opportunity to benefit a lot of humans. Again, it levels the playing field for that individual versus, the multinational corporation, as far as what they can get done and how they're able to operate and operate within the world. And, they don't have to hire 500 people to have their marketing or their brand awareness. They can do it with 2 or 3, or for some of them, even just do it themselves, basically, which is super powerful. And again, I love the idea that word of mouth is like it should be the most powerful way that your business is being promoted among, whether it's your customers or stakeholders or, anything within that business. I mean, that's a powerful lesson I think businesses can take away from it. And instead of it just being, all right, how much money can we throw at this and what's the return on that investment? It's, what is the impact that our business is going to have on humanity? Is it a positive? Is it a negative? And again, the decisions that these businesses are making, how does that play into how it benefits a section of humanity, or for I think the more that we go down this road, it's going to be the greater good of all of humanity.
Yeah. And I want to say this too, Joe, just before we go here, that if you're a business owner and you're listening to this, is the goal here, the message is not go create a conscious business. That's not actually the goal. That's an outcome. The goal is to do your inner work and then let the business be a reflection of that inner work. Otherwise, you're going to get what I call woke washing. You're going to get the kind of optics of social justice, and and I guess that's better than nothing. That's better than being an asshole, I guess. But I don't think that is definitely not our point. That's why we don't teach consciousness to people. You are responsible for your own level of consciousness. What we do is just help you use your consciousness to create systemic change using your mind and your resources and your brand to do that. So I would just say, keep doing the inner work, keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep raising your consciousness higher and higher, and then watch what happens to your business when you do that.
Right. Yeah, it's powerful. It's a whole new energy that comes into the business when you allow your soul to be spoken into and guiding that business, right? It's like just fundamentally powerful. And like you said, that's how businesses have been run the whole time. It's just been kind of swept under the rug and hush hush, very esoteric knowledge within these business leaders and business owners that success, that money, that all of that is a spiritual endeavor, not necessarily a physical endeavor. So, well, Virginia, Justin, I greatly appreciate you coming on today to share this wonderful conversation. I am blessed to have you in my circle, and I'm hopeful that in the future you'll be making massive change in the world, and maybe come back on the show, and we'll see how this journey goes for you guys.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for the great questions.
Thank you again for listening to Changing the Channel with Joe Garner. If you enjoyed the show, please follow the podcast, hit the bell to know when a new show comes out, share with a friend, and rate us on whatever platform you're tuning in from. It helps get these messages out to more people to create the collective shift in reality we are here to experience. Make sure you interact with the Q&A and poll sections of the show so I can continue to provide content you enjoy. Finally, check out my website in the show notes to become a VIP of Changing the Channel and join the shift that is happening.